Hello, everyone. We are Group 5, and we just wanted to start off our group storyboard today for our Prairie equipment by just introducing ourselves. Hi, I'm Anna, and welcome.
I'm Jonah Gary.
I'm Jake Crickmore.
I'm Hayden Phillips.
And the problem today that we'll be discussing is through Bob Lane's business, Prairie. Prairie. And where the problem is, should Bob Lane partner with a new business partner in Ralph Cook or stay put in his current situation, which is a small state-contained company. And his philosophy when he started was to grow a business quickly and get rich as quickly as he can so he can retire with a lot of money. And this is a problem because Cook wants to expand the business and Lane isn't sure if he wants to. He's nervous about the next tax bracket and the stress of a larger company.
So the situation essentially is that if Bob chooses to opt out of this partnership with Ralph, he would be missing out on a lot of revenue. On the other end of the spectrum, though, he would be getting in over his head, or he would be taking in more than he could honestly manage with the new business and the expansion. But Ralph himself is an advocate for expansion because he thinks that it would benefit them both equally.
And so there were two alternatives that we found in this case, and the first alternative was to partner with Ralph Cook and give up 40%. He would no longer have to handle all of the expansion processes all by himself. And then the second option that we had, or the second alternative, was that Bob himself would keep all of the equity in the company and would have to handle all of the expansion to himself. And an upside of this alternative was that we found was Bob has two people under him that have been working for him for a while, whose names are Colso and Spooner, and he could just hand the company right over to them instead of having to figure out all of the legal issues with a partnership and with Ralph Cook first, just handing down his business when he's ready to retire.
Anna, do you mind explaining alternative one briefly again? You cut out for a second.
Oh, of course. So alternative one is to partner with Ralph Cook, giving up 40% of his responsibility or 40% of his equity in the company, and also no longer having to handle all of the expansion by himself. And this would just give him more free time.
Yeah.
So looking at the first alternative, it would give him more time to spend with his wife who is facing terminal illness. His net sales would increase substantially since Cook has former experience with other companies and he has a very strong background with increasing companies' performances. His net income would decrease during the short term, but over the long term, the net sales would end up increasing. And then if he wanted to choose this alternative to partner with Ralph Cook, he would end up retiring early since giving up 40% of his company away to Ralph Cook. And then when we look at the second alternative, his net sales won't grow substantially because he'll be, instead of partnering with Ralph Cook, who has experience in growing businesses, he'll be doing it by himself. He'll also be spending more time dealing with operations within the company instead of working alongside Ralph. And then he also has to deal with the expenses of the new factory all to himself. And then in the short term, his net income will be greater, but then long term, it won't be as greater as if he was to choose the first alternative. And then the highlighting point of this second alternative is that he'll be able to take more vacation weeks per year, or less amount, sorry.
And so we compared these two alternatives pretty deeply and pretty thoroughly as they helped us make our decision in what we recommended Ralph to do. And so the first alternative had three main parts to it. And the first was that it would allow him more free time as he would be giving up a lot of the responsibility. And Bob seems to be a person that really likes to spend his free time either with his wife or out farming, and it would give him a lot more time to do those hobbies that he really enjoys as he wouldn't be handling all the responsibilities of the company. It would be more profitable in the long run as they would not just be expanding to just one other state. If they were just doing the expansion with Bob, they would be expanding to the entire country. And so they'd be getting a lot more profit in there. and he'd be making a lot more money in the long run. And then the third is that he'd have a lot less responsibility. And as I said before, this would allow him to go out and just not worry as much about his company and just have more free time to spend with himself and with his wife and doing the things that he likes. And then the second alternative, there were two main things that we could find that were big for this one, and that it would allow him to keep all of the equity in his company. And this is really important, as obviously it's been his company for a long time. It's kind of like his child in a way, and he would just be able to keep the entire thing. And second, he would have to stay in the business as long as it took for the expansion to finish, as he couldn't just get into the expansion and then just decide to leave as soon as he didn't want to be there anymore, as he would have to make sure that the expansion went smoothly and that the processes started up and running, and then before he would retire, obviously, and then he could pass down those shares instead of having that more free time than he would get in alternative one.
So our recommendation at the end of the day is we recommend that Bob Lane partner with Ralph Cook and give over those 40% shares in the company. We think this is a great call because out of the two, we feel that Bob would want to leave the company and just lose the stress, and he doesn't need the extra money to continue to work. The plan would be that Bob would work for the company for a few years after the sale to help train the young and future leaders of Prairie Equipment in the ways that Bob wants Prairie Equipment to be run in his absence. And once that him and the new board felt that it was ready for Bob to leave, Bob would retire. And we feel that Bob would be okay with this, as he's made enough money to keep him happy, and he can go take care of his wife, and he can just drop all of the stress that he's been carrying the last few years in his business, and it would go on to expand.
As far as actually getting started towards achieving our recommendation, the first step would be to officially give Bob shares and power over to Ralph. Now, this wouldn't mean that Bob is immediately going to step away and step down. He's still going to have a little bit of a say to make sure that his company keeps the traditions, and he can sort of groom and mold the future executives and leaders of this company to make sure that they carry on the same style that he kind of enacted for when he started this place. Because like Anna said before, this is kind of like his child, and he wants to make sure that it's being done the right way and everything's not changing just because there's a change in leadership. So he would have kind of a say in where this is going and the direction that it would head in the future. And then when it feels right, yeah.
All right, so the final point in the expansion is once it's starting to be finalized and the new executives have been selected and trained in Prairie's dealings and philosophies, Bob would be able to select and give responsibilities to Colso and Spooner, who have been working with him for a really long time, and he's been training them to replace him. And they give him the opportunity to give his shares away, which would finally allow him to retire rich and go take care of his wife. To recap, Bob Lane wants to decide whether he is staying as a head of his company or giving up most of his equity and partner with Ralph Cook. Bob intends to retire earlier, but he mainly wanted to get wealthy fast. Based on the circumstances surrounding his involvement in the company, we believe that it would be best for Bob to partner with Ralph Cook.
All right, thanks for listening to our presentation.